Hello, animal science students. What we're going to be able to do today is finish up your notes on the poultry unit. We'll be able to do a few more experiment or dissections and keep handling some eggs, but we should be able to finish the notes today. So our first objective is going to be talking about the breeds. With the breeds, we have about 12 different breeds of poultry. I slipped in a few different ones besides just chickens, but with our chickens, the number one leg ayer is what's called a leghorn. And what I'd like you to do is just go through your notes and prepare yourself by going over like Google Images and finding pictures of the different breeds. Specifically, here would be a picture of a leghorn. The leghorns are going to be white with a larger comb, and with that comb, they're going to sometimes droop it over, but they're not going to be a very broad bird. They're going to be more looking like a conditioning score of about a 3 or a 2 on a dairy animal, because they're going to always look overworked because that's what they are. As you go through the rest of these, this one's going to be kind of a red. It's a layer, used to be a dual purpose. Same thing with this one. It's going to have a little more coloring. Here's our black and white one. This one's going to have some furry neck. This one's going to have like a poof on its head. This is going to be our big broad-chested chicken. This one's going to have the little feathers on the leg, it's going to have some black and white coloring to it. This one's going to be poofy. This one's going to be the little chickens. So that these ones here are going to have a lot of different variations to them, but they all have some specific characteristics. Then we get down to these two. Here you got your duck. This is the number one duck breed for butchering. And then here is the number one turkey breed for butchering. With these chickens, when we start talking about like the leghorn chicken, the male birds have no purpose, and they're usually killed off, and so they are euthanized, which is a sad reality into it. And it'd be kind of interesting if somebody would be able to go look and see if they could look up whether or not there is byproducts used from these males or what actually happens, because I don't know. So that would be kind of an interesting one for you guys to go through and see. And what they can do, because chickens do have that cloaca, and it's hard to tell whether or not they are male or female, and they have what are called sex-linked. And with these sex-linked ones, the male is actually the one that carries the two sex chromosomes, and so they found like some red and some black variations that make it so the males will show up that they can be the heterozygous ones and show up a color, whereas the females only have the one. So it's like in people we have those X and Y, and that's the male. But in chickens, that XY is actually the female, and the male is XX. And so that's a little different than in people and in other mammals. Within those, they don't really use XY, they actually use what are called ZW instead. So in the birds, the female determines the sex. The males only get one gene and show the trait. And so then the females are the ones that have two genes and mask the traits. That's wrong. The females only get one gene. The males, so we gotta change that. The males have two genes and mask the trait, so then they show the color. They show the color looking for, and this one won't show the color. The females will show a different color. That's what our sex-linked is all about. So, what we're trying to do then is figure out the best hybrid between different birds, and with that, what we mean by hybrid is a cross between two different breeds. For instance, in the early 1900s, we were able to figure out that if we took a dark Cornish, which is those broad birds, with a Plymouth Rock, we got what's called a Cornish rock, and you get a beautiful white bird. Or at that time, it wasn't white, but you would get no, it was white. Son of a bucket. I'm losing track here. Sorry, kiddos. It was a white bird, and that's what we have here today, where the white would show up over the dark. And out in our little pins, occasionally we'll still get some speckled ones to show up because they're showing some of those different colors from their hybrids. What has died out is what's called a dual-purpose bird. These dual-purpose birds died out because we've vertically integrated our poultry, and now people raise them as hobbies. Would be the only place these dual purpose are raised, because the vertical integration within our chickens have made it so you have operations that are layers and you have operations that are broilers, and you don't need anything that doesn't do perfect. And that's where the dual purpose would kind of give you the middle ground. Well, there's no reason for middle ground. And these middle ground birds will sort of have what our Cornish rocks have been bred not to have, and that's what's called broodiness. And so our dual purpose and then our layers, I have what's called a broodiness, which is a trait for setting and protecting eggs. These broodiness traits are trying to get away from them so that our chickens don't have those, but it's very hard to take out broodiness out of a leghorn that lays so many eggs, because the correlation between the mothering of the leghorn and the want to brood is too high to get rid of. So we make sure that, like in the picture up above here, when they lay the eggs actually going to fall down they're going to be slanted, and the egg will fall right away, so she doesn't even really get a chance. Within these another trait that we have tried to get into during our hybrids are what are called white plumage. This produces a better looking carcass, and also the pin feathers aren't as obvious to see, so that when people are eating them, you can't see them quite as much. The broad-breasted white turkeys are one of the higher ones, in that there are dark turkeys, but it doesn't make much sense to keep them around if they're going to show the pigment, and it's not going to taste different, but it's going to cause the consumer to not like it. Just like the brown eggs is another trait, and the brown eggs have a red pigmented hens, like the red pigment in the ear lobes are going to lay a brown egg. People think that's the right type of egg. Well, in all reality, they don't have any higher nutritional value, so they're actually just kind of a ploy, and some people think they're better. And what we have found is that these red, like Leghorn breed-like ones, and our New Hampshires, we want them because people demand these brown eggs, but they don't do as well, and that's why they have to charge more for the brown eggs. It's not so much they're healthier; it's just that they're less efficient, and so it's just more of like a Nike or an Under Armour that might not be as good, but still people buy them because of just the brand. Those chickens all have to incubate, and so switching gears a little away from traits and staying in there with the egg idea is chickens are incubated for 21 days, turkeys are 28. A big thing to do is to make sure that proper ventilation is there so that the oxygen can go to the embryo, and that the carbon dioxide released by the embryo inside of the egg is removed, because that's a hard thing to quite wrap your head around, is that inside that egg there's a living chicken, and that chicken is breathing, not really breathing like with its lungs, but it is releasing and absorbing oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide that need to get it out of the ventilator. Other thing that's important is to keep our humidity low during the first 19 days so that it creates an air pocket so that there is oxygen to be absorbed through the membranes to the chicken, but then during the last few days or 2 days to increase that humidity so that the shell will break apart. Staying with that reproduction, that egg is starts off in what's called the ovary. The ovary is what produces follicles and releases the ovum, or what you guys would call the yolk. It is then caught by what's called the infundibulum, and it goes through, and if there was a rooster to fertilize, that's where it would be fertilized. But most generally, we don't have any, and you don't need to, and then it's just skipped. As it continues on, it hits the magnum, and in the magnum, it adds the albumin, which is mostly protein. Higher in carbohydrates. And with that higher carbohydrate place, it then will lead to what's called the isthmus. The isthmus adds the shell membrane. So it wraps around that albumin and that yolk. And then we would add, after adding the shell membrane, we add a calcified shell, and out pops the egg through the cloaca. The cloaca is also the site of defecation and urination, but the defecation and urination are kind of mixed together, as mentioned earlier in the previous lectures. A good laying chicken will release about 240, or about 26 hours they will release an egg. And you know when they're starting to get to be really lean is just like that dairy animal starts to lose weight, and we try to make it so that it keeps that body conditioning score around that 275 or 3.25. Our vent, which is also a synonym of what's called the cloaca, so it's kind of like a synonym, so we can kind of add here a synonym. I don't think I'm going to be able to smell it right. Synonym. I butchered that one. Mom. That's not right. Synonym. I can't spell synonym. There we go. Way off. Cloaca. And that'll be the first place that loses it, and showing that your chicken's really laying good eggs, or laying a lot of eggs, or that every 26 hours or less even. In some of our leghorns, we can get more than 240. But then another one is shanks is the next place. I'm sorry, not next place, the last place for it to lose. So you look at its legs, and if they are that pale yellow, then that would mean that they are laid about all the eggs are going to, and it's getting probably time for them to molt. The last thing would be with that is our chickens need to have an increase in calcium. Because they're laying those eggs, they get a supplemental calcium of about 3.5%. Okay. What we're going to do here for the last minutes here on Monday is get a little bit of clay out, and what I'd like you guys to do is make clay reproductive tracts of the chicken. So if you search the internet, you should find quite a few reproductive tracts that look like this. And what we'd like you to do is find a desk that's in the middle and make a ovary, label it with one of the Visa markers. Then have your infundibulum, which is going to catch that one, and then the magnum, the isthmus, the shell gland or uterus, and then we have vaginal cavity or the vagina here, but that's not quite as important as then you have the cloaca. This large intestine is going to be connected into there because that's where it defecates, but the cloaca be the end. So what we did today was the reproductive tracts, and then moved through some traits that chickens have, and some breeds. As you guys hopefully filled out your notes, finish today by getting a reproductive tract made and put onto one of the desks.